welcome to Pyperh Reads. This is my new booktube channel and I'm really excited to be here and to talk to you guys about one of my favorite things in the entire world, books. So I figured I would start out my channel with a monthly wrap-up. I've actually read a lot more this past January and February than what I'm used to. My goal this year was 30 books because last year I did 25. I upped it to 30 and I already have almost 8 books completed. So we are going to start out by doing a January and February wrap-up. So the first book that I completed in January of this year was the 4th book of the Percy Jackson series, The Battle of the Labyrinth by Rick Riordan. I finished the other 3 books in the series earlier in the year. It only took me probably 2 weeks to binge these. These are a series that my sister-in-law has been begging me to read for a long time, and finally I succumbed to it. So book 4 and book 5 were both my first 2 books of 2020. Book 4, The Battle of the Labyrinth, I don't want to give too much away in case you guys have not read the Percy Jackson series, but I have to say that book 4, The Battle of the Labyrinth, is probably my favorite book in the entire series. I really enjoyed how Rick Riordan was able to take a Greek mythology and put a spin on it so that it was much easier to understand. There's so much going on in Greek mythology, and it's something that I've always been interested in, but I've always had a really hard time following exactly what's happening. And Rick Riordan is able to put some fun fictional stories onto the Greek mythology, oh my goodness, onto the Greek mythology stories to make them a lot easier to grasp, and so I really enjoyed that. So book 4 I finished in like 2 days, and then I moved on to book 5, which was The Last Olympian, the 5th and final book in the series. I had a harder time getting through this one. It was a lot about the war, which is the whole buildup of the other books, but the ending really did save it for me. It was an extremely well-written ending, and so I was really happy with it then, but I struggled, and this one took me a bit longer to read, not because it is longer, but just because it didn't keep me as interested as, say, The Battle of the Labyrinth. So that was my second book. Third book that I read this year is Verity by Colleen Hoover. Now, I did a little book review on this on my other channel, and so if you're interested in that, you can go check that out. But Verity is a book that I had been recommended for well over a year, and why I didn't read it sooner, I couldn't tell you. This book was 100% a 5-star out of 5. I would give it way more than that if I could. It's a psychological thriller in which the main character, Lowen, she is a struggling author who gets the break of a lifetime where there is a well-known author named Verity Crawford, who has fallen ill and is unable to complete a book series. So Lowen is contracted to come in and ghostwrite the final books in the series. Well, when she gets to the house to start looking over Verity's things, she finds Verity's manuscript and starts uncovering all of these horrific secrets about Verity, about the house, about the family. And the twist at the ending was one that I definitely did not see coming. And so it was a wild ride. It took you everything from excited to terrified to nauseated to, I mean, it was just a whirlwind of emotions. And it was the first book that I read by Colleen Hoover, but it's stuck with me, and I'm still trying to figure out what I think about the ending, so I'm really excited to continue on with some of Colleen Hoover's other books. Okay, the next book that I read this year was actually on my Kindle, and so I will put that right here, and that was A Curse So Dark and Lonely by Bridget Kemmerer. Now, this book, I have to say that I went into it with very little as far as what I was going to think about it and the expectations, because it is a fairy tale retelling. It's a Beauty and the Beast fairy tale retelling, and I have read a few of those and none of them have turned out well. So when I heard about A Curse So Dark and Lonely, it took me quite a while to read it, and finally I picked it up. There was another booktuber that recommended it over and over again, so finally I read it, and I have to tell you guys that I was not disappointed. I flew through this story. The main characters are fantastic. The spin that they put on it is fantastic. The world jumping is a really cool idea. I just absolutely fell in love. The angsty kind of love-hate romance is a huge trope of mine, and I couldn't get enough of it. So I highly recommend, if you guys like fairy tale retellings, or if you're a Beauty and the Beast fan, or if you're kind of looking for more of an adult retelling, it was amazing, and I highly recommend that you check it out. That one I definitely gave a 5 out of 5 stars, and I'm excited to continue on with the series. The next book that I read this year is You by Caroline Kepnes. Now, with You, I read it because I had been looking forward to watching the Netflix series, and so I really wanted to read the book before I read the series, or before I watched the series, because I feel like after I watch something, I have a hard time going back and reading it. So I read it. What to say about You? It definitely was a wild ride. It wasn't what I was expecting. The book is one that had been discussed over and over and over in a book group that I'm a part of. Some people loved it, some people hated it, some people couldn't get into it. I definitely got into it, and I definitely flew through it. There was a lot more sex and sexualness in it than I was expecting. Now, don't get me wrong, I love reading about sex, I love reading about romance, but just to read the amount of time that this guy like masturbates outside somebody's window, sometimes it just got a little uncomfortable, and that's throughout like the entire book. But I really liked getting into Joe's head. The whole book is from his perspective, and it's kind of crazy, and you feel a little bit crazy on how you're able to take this author, or, you know, how this author is able to take this guy who's obviously a psychopath and get you to kind of understand where he's coming from. You get to really like him. You kind of start rooting for him. And while, you know, you have these victims of his, you're kind of like upset at them when he does something that's pretty messed up. And you're like, no, you know, I totally understand where Joe's coming from. And so the author somehow was also able to make you a crazy person along the way. So I did really enjoy You, but it did make me a bit uncomfortable at times, which is kind of hard for me to do. It's hard to make me uncomfortable in a book. I think the only other book I can think of that's made me uncomfortable was the book Teeth. This guy right here, I had to DNF it because it was uncomfortable, but we can get into that in a different video. But yeah, so I read You. I can't remember what I gave it on Goodreads, if I gave it a 4 or a 5. I would probably give it like a 4.25, because I did fly through it, and it did keep me engaged, and it did keep me super interested. There were just some parts that were like, a little oogie. Yeah, so the next things that I read this year, I'm not going to go into too much detail on, because on Sunday we are going to be doing our live book review of these. Every month I do a book review where we pick the books and then we read them for the next 4 weeks, and then we get together on that following Sunday. It's like the first Sunday of every month, and we discuss them. And so these are actually our next discussions, but these are a manga series that I started recently. The first and second book in the Ancient Magus' Bride. And so I'm not going to tell you anything about them because we have a book review on Sunday. And so there's still time if you guys want to pick these up and join us for our book review. They are beautiful. But those were part of my monthly wrap-up. Finally, the last book that I read this year, or I'm currently reading, is Kushiel's Dart by Jacqueline Carey. So Kushiel's Dart, let me just start out by saying it is really, really long. I'm reading it on Kindle and it is 902 pages. This was recommended to me by my really good friend Natalie. I'll put her channel down in the description. What to say about Kushiel's Dart? I am having such a love-hate relationship with this book, so I'm not fully ready to completely disclose how I'm feeling. Right now I'm on like page 630 or 640, so I've got like 200 and some pages left. The first couple hundred pages of the book I had a really hard time with. It was hard to get into. There's a lot of politics that I kind of skip over through the book because I'm not a really big political reader. If there's a lot of politics in a book, usually I kind of sway away from it. So the first like 300 pages I was having a really hard time getting into, and I'm like, Natalie, girl, I don't know if I can do this. And she's like, keep going. So then I hit like page 350 and this big twist happened and like all this shit went down. And so then I kept reading and I read really fast up until, you know, like page 500, 550, and then it kind of slowed down again, and now it's slowly picking up again. So it's had a lot of curves and dips. But basically, Kushiel's Dart is about a young woman named Phaedra. Let me explain this the best I can. She's born into a world where she is a servant of Nama, which is a really nice way basically of saying a whore or a prostitute. It's this god that they worship, and so they are born into like this slavery of that, where they offer up their skills. They're trained in it from the time they become a woman, and they're trained in the sexual arts, and they are bought out through contracts that they can agree or disagree to. They perform their contracts, and then their patrons pay them money to complete their mark, which is basically this tattoo along their back. Once their tattoo is completed, they are now free, and they can either continue in the service of Nama on their own, or they can completely disregard it and go and be free citizens. So Phaedra happens to have Kushiel's Dart, which I'm not going to spoil on what it is, but it is a red mote or a red dot in one of her eyes that has very specific connotations as to how she's able to perform in her arts. So if you guys choose to read it, I will let you figure that out. But like I said, there are some parts of it that I absolutely love and I'm really enjoying, and then there's some parts of it that are really dull, which I think you're going to have with any pages or any book that's almost 1,000 pages long. So I'm really hoping to finish that up this week, because then on Sunday I am going to move on to another book. So that's what I got. So that was my January, February wrap up. After I finish with Kushiel's Dart, I will be 8 books deep into my 30 book goal of this year. So yeah, I'm really interested to hear what you guys have read this year, if there's anything that you're excited to read. If you're interested in any of these and you're going to read any of them, I would love to hear about it. Or I'd like to hear if any of you guys have read any of these and what your thoughts on them were. I hope that you guys have an awesome night. Thank you so much for tuning in to Pyperh Reads. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more content, and please hit the little bell icon so you're notified every time I make a new video, and I will see you guys very soon, and at the very least on Sunday for our book club. Yeah, so you guys have an awesome night, and I will see you then.